Welcome, everyone. This is the latest in the series of the DCC webinars to introduce digital research infrastructures. And today's session, we are focusing on getting to know the European Open Science Cloud and a very new project that is being coordinated by JISC and involving DCC and UKRI as partners called PATH2EOSCUK UK. So the session today will be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you know the drill, just keep your camera off and unmute. There will be a shared notes document that you'll have a link to in the chat. You're welcome to either put questions in the chat as we go or into the shared document, and we'll have time for some discussion as we go forward. So today's session is really intended to be a little bit of a mix of a very basic introduction to the European Open Science Cloud, because we're aware that it's still quite a nebulous concept for a lot of people in the UK. So we wanted to have this session to provide a little bit of background, a little bit of an understanding as to what EOSC is. And we also wanted to introduce the new PATH2EOSCUK UK project, which is very short. You'll hear more about that later. But what we're really trying to do within that project is to get some engagement going again around EOSC in the UK. So that is what we're trying to do today. I think just a slight apology for those of you, we see that there are some people in the room who are very expert in EOSC, and you may hear some stuff that you already know, but we're hoping that you'll also hear some new stuff. So please bear with us as we go through the kind of introductory session, and stay with us because we're desperately wanting to hear your opinions when we get to the Q&A discussion bit. So I think for now, I'm just going to try to advance my slide. I just wanted to kind of remind people a little bit about who we are. So the DCC, we've been around now since 2004, so coming up for almost 25 years. We are an international expert center for digital curation and research data management. You probably know us for services like DMP Online, which helps you to write data management plans. We also run our annual conference, the International Digital Curation Conference. It's taking place in Lisbon in February this year, and the call for papers has just opened up. So we would really encourage all of you to consider putting in a submission and joining us in Portugal next year. We've also been really active in a number of EOSC-related projects over the years, going way back to EOSC Pilot, which was, I think, about 2017. So starting to look at the very earliest definition of what EOSC might be, through to more recent projects and ongoing ones, which are trying to implement EOSC in a practical sense. So EOSC is kind of close to our hearts, and we hope that it'll become a little bit closer to everybody else's over the course of the session. We have 4 speakers today. We're going to hear from Sophie Janacek first, who is head of UKRI Digital Research Infrastructures. We have Helen Clare, who is Senior E-Infrastructure Strategy Manager for Skills at JISC. Stephen Sargent, Professor of Astronomy at the Open University, and Sally Chambers, who is Head of Research Infrastructure Services at the British Library, and also Director of DRI, which is another research infrastructure. So Sophie is going to set the scene a little bit about the UKRI and their interest in the kind of themes that underpin the European Open Science Cloud and relating it back to some of the work going on at UKRI. Helen will give us that sort of in a nutshell view of what the EOSC is, and then introduce the new PATH2EOSCUK UK project. Sally and Stephen are going to give us more of their personal views on why it matters to get engaged with EOSC, and we hope that that will hopefully resonate with some of you as well going forward. So before we go on to the talks, we did want to get a little bit of a sense about who's in the room. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we can put the link into the chat. I don't know, Agnes, if you're able to put the link to the WooClap in the chat. If you can go to wooclap.com and enter the code BCBKQKI. It's also in the shared notes if you want to access it there. That would be great. I'll just give you a minute or two to to get there. And I'm going to open up the poll. So the first question is just to kind of find out, where are you coming from today? If you can let us know where you're joining from, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so quite a lot from Scotland, England, UK. That's good. That's the kind of crowd we're hoping to get today. So excellent. Some very local ones, Manchester, London. So we're getting into the kind of local information as well. So that's great. Great to see we've got France in the room. We saw some registration information. So it's great to see our colleagues from France joining us. We know that there's national level in setting up a national French level node as well. So it's great to have you in the room. Ireland as well, a similar situation. I think we know you're involved in another one of these projects to progress things in Ireland. So it's great to see that we're attracting some international colleagues to these sessions. So we'll just give you another minute or so to continue with that. All right. We'll then move on. Great to see that. I have to try to move something out of the way. Now we just wanted to get a sense of your role. If you can help us kind of figure out what is your role, that would always be helpful for us just to get a sense of the kinds of people joining these sessions in the future. So got open research librarians, data stewards, which is great to see. Head of training, excellent. Training is definitely a component we're hoping to see really being picked up in any kind of node activity we do. Lots of different roles here, so excellent to see a pretty broad range. So there are people who are actively involved in research infrastructures like Elixir, so we know you're involved in lots of different EOSC-related activities. And we also see some people who are running repositories. So great to see such a wide and diverse range of people in the audience. That's really wonderful. And the last question I have before we move on to the interesting talks that you'll want to hear about is just to get a sense of, how familiar are you at the moment with the European Open Science Cloud? You can choose not at all, a little bit, or very familiar. And we normally see a trend when we do these kind of polls that a little bit tends to come out on top, and it seems to be the case for this one as well. So we do see that we've got quite a few people who are very familiar, and that, I think, given some of the names we saw on the registration list, is no surprise. But yeah, it looks like our pattern is holding out for this one. And that is actually really great to see as well, because while we do want to engage with those people who do know a lot about the European Open Science Cloud at the moment, and we're really keen to get you involved in the PATH2EOSC project, we also want the people who don't know anything about EOSC or are a little bit unsure as to what it can offer them. We really want to have you involved with us and to become engaged with us as we progress the work in the UK. So thank you very much for taking the time to complete that. I'm going to stop sharing now. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Sophie, just so she can give us a little bit of setting the scene from the UKRI perspective. So over to you, Sophie.
Great, thank you. So thanks for the introduction. I'm Sophie Janacek from UK Research and Innovation. And I don't have a nice slide like Joy did to introduce UKRI, but I think for the benefit of some of our international colleagues here today, UK Research and Innovation, it's the national funder in the UK, and many people on the call will know us as a funding body. We also do a lot of policy work, we run infrastructures as well, and also engaged in a lot of international initiatives such as EOSC. And just for context, I work in the Digital Research Infrastructure Programme. I'm head of programme, and some of the perspectives today will be biased towards digital infrastructure, but we see EOSC as very much cross-cutting. So if you look at the EOSC website, the vision is to put in place a system of systems to find and access data and services for research and innovation in Europe. And it's also about helping enable fair research outputs within and across disciplines and borders. Many of the themes in that vision, they're very familiar to me in my work around digital research infrastructure. And they align very well with our DRI program strategy. For example, within the DRI program, we have 4 priorities, and 2 of those are around interconnectivity and FAIR. So FAIR is really important to us, and we see the FAIR principles as key to achieving the benefits of data. Now, the FAIR principles, they're not just important for digital infrastructure, they're really cross-cutting. For example, they cut across UKRI's new data policy, which is currently under development, and also the AI strategic framework as well. And so if you look at the EOSC vision and UKRI's activities and activities in the UK, you can see there's a lot of shared interests around many of these themes. And it's worth noting UK has UKRI representatives on both the EOSC steering board and the EOSC association. So added to this, the UK really has a lot of strengths in digital infrastructure and related activities. And when I say related activities, we're not just talking here about the physical infrastructure, we're talking about things like skills and the software that enables that use of the infrastructure. And the UK also, as we know, has a very long-standing commitment to open research. Alongside this, international collaboration is a really key component of research and innovation and of that enabling infrastructure as well. And in fact, you'll hear today, some UKRI DRIs are already contributing to some of the thematic nodes as part of EOSC. And finally, there is some contribution to EOSC, as I've mentioned there already, but we see that kind of knowledge of EOSC and the understanding of the potential benefits it could bring, that knowledge isn't widely distributed in the UK. So there's a chance with this PATH2EOSCUK project to really help build that understanding of the benefits. And another part of the project is to start to define and gather evidence about how a UK node could look as well. So it's an important project, and more opportunity to hear about it today. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sophie. Yeah, we definitely hope that you will want to engage with us too. So, you know, please do add your name to the list in our shared notes if you feel like you want to take this journey with us on the PATH2EOSCUK UK project. So now we're going to hand over to Helen. She is going to share and give us that, in a nutshell, view of the European Open Science Cloud. I will say at this point, you feel free to put questions in the chat or the shared document, but we'll come back to them at the end after the speakers, just because I know sometimes there can be lots of questions around EOS concepts, so we'll come back to them at the end. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Joy. Yes, welcome to the session today. I'm going to give that high-level overview of EOSC and provide further details if you'd like them, because there is a lot of history and background to EOSC, so we could talk for hours, but we're giving a high-level overview, and as I say, with further links. I've been involved with EOSC since 2019. Some of you on the call have been involved for longer than that, probably since EOSC's inception, and some of you may be new, as you've said. But we hope that this introductory talk, combined with our later speakers, you'll get an insight to what EOSC is and its potential. I'll give you a bit more detail on the PATH2EOSCUK UK project that JISC is leading, as said earlier, in collaboration with UKRI and DCC. In terms of this presentation, the first part of the presentation is actually adapted from a slide deck from the EOSC Association, and I'll mention them in a moment. I have cut it down, but if you want the full detail, the link is on the slide there to the full presentation. And as Joy said, I can guarantee you will have questions, but we do ask you to listen first. Please note your questions and we'll come back to them at the end of the session. So to start off with what seems a simple question, but isn't, what is EOSC and what is it trying to do? So as I say, EOSC inception was 2015, and the most common definition that is discussed now is describing it as a web of fair data and services. So it aims to lower barriers for access to data and services, to support interdisciplinary research, and basically to make research possible that perhaps wasn't before. But it's important to be aware that EOSC is a vision, and it's complex and it's ambitious. And it's not just about technology, it is about legal, political and financial issues. So please do bear that in mind with your questions and certainly with your responses to maybe some of the answers. It is a vision, as I say, and it's being co-created. Many of the issues are not solved, and we're still looking for answers to some of the questions. So not everything is necessarily clear at this point, but use cases are emerging. And I hope after today, we'll bring that vision to life for you, and we can start that discussion about what it means to the UK. In terms of the background, I mean, EOSC is key to many European goals in terms of research and innovation, and it's mentioned in many influential reports, policies and strategies, and indeed in the slide deck, you can find all of the links, the full slide deck to where it's referenced. But issues around AI, digital sovereignty and competitiveness, you know, there are ties into how EOSC can support these agendas. This particular slide shows a set of advocacy materials. It's been released recently to support the position of EOSC as the EC negotiates its next round of funding, Framework Programme 10 from 2028. So you may find those useful to check out for a bit of background. In terms of the governance of EOSC and who's in charge of its development, it's coordinated by what's called the tripartite governance, with representatives from the European Commission, firstly, from the steering board that Sophie mentioned, which has representatives from member states and associated countries, and UKRI are represented through Rachel Bruce on the steering board. And then finally, the EOSC Association, which is a membership organisation, which you pay to be involved in the discussions and have a voice in the development. Currently, the UK has 2 observer members and 2 full members. So compared to some other countries, we don't have a lot of members of the EOSC Association. In terms of funding, it's currently mostly funded by projects coming from the Horizon programmes, but it is increasingly being co-funded by other sources such as national infrastructures. As you can see from the slide there, it's being seen as being the backbone of Europe's digital research and innovation ecosystem, and it isn't going away. It's also described as being the data space for research. And as Sophie mentioned, we need to consider how best to engage on a national level and how our infrastructure fits with this. So in terms of the practicalities of how EOSC works, it is a federation, and in terms of how it is, the principles that underpin the federation, as Sophie mentioned again, the idea is it's a system of systems. So it's an internet-connected system that is inclusive, community-driven, with rules around trust, security and governance, which allow flexibility and adaptability. So this is the vision, and in terms of the development, there has been a lot of discussion. As I say, it's just over 10 years since EOSC was originally defined, and there was a lot of talking and there was a lot of discussion about what it should look like, how it should work, and we could probably still be there. But there was a shift in discussion around 3 to 4 years ago to just trying to make it work. Let's try to build it and answer some of the difficult questions as we build it. So this is when the EC decided to launch the EOSC EU node, which is the first node in the federation. So the nodes is the terminology used to refer to the different elements in the system. So we had the first EOSC EU node, which is essentially a demonstrator, but also it provides some of the core functionality that enables the rest of the federation to work. So more nodes followed in 2025 with what's called the first wave of nodes. And in the second wave, another 14 nodes were just announced in April. In terms of the nodes, you'll see from this visual representation, this is the first wave nodes and how the idea of the federation connects. There are different types of nodes emerging. There are national nodes, as you can see, Slovakia, Italy, thematic nodes, and then also infrastructure nodes, which provide, again, these key parts of the infrastructure. But this is evolving, and the nodes are evolving as time passes. So this is the first wave, and we have another 14. In terms of what connects the federation, what holds it together, well, this is where the EOSC Federation Handbook comes in, and it is available for you to look if you want a lot of the detail on how the federation works. But it outlines sort of the rules, the principles, the standards that join the federation together. and it outlines that expectation while hopefully enabling flexibility. Currently, to join the Federation, there are only 2 mandatory requirements, which is AAI, so authentication and access, and resource discovery, so being available in the EOSC catalogue. But those requirements will increase. But I'd say this is where the glue is in the Federation handbook. And it's moving quickly now. So we had a few years of not moving too quickly, and now we are moving quite quickly. So the Federation is growing. And I think what's quickly becoming really apparent now that it isn't just a technical infrastructure, it is also a social infrastructure. So bringing these parts of the community together to work on these common problems and come to a consensus on solutions is part of what EOSC is. I would recommend, we're going to get some insight from our other speakers today about their perspectives and their actual uses that they are involved in with EOSC, but there are use cases out there. There have been many developed over the years, but the last 6 that were released from the link on the slide there are the most recent that really summarize the interconnected nature of the nodes. So I do recommend having a look at those. In practical terms, in terms of the Federation and how it works, this is from their own plans. So this is what they're saying they're going to do in 2026. So it is migrating that build up. So really moving into operation, which is outlined in the memorandum of understanding that the nodes have signed. Evolving the federating capabilities and the interoperability, and then moving to production. I think it's important to say that the nodes that are currently existing in the first wave are actually still in prototype. So they will move to production later on this year, and we will continue to address some of the legal, governance, operational and engagement requirements. They're not going to be solved easily, but we will continue to work together on those. And then the expansion, so enrolling more nodes and onboarding more resources into nodes. And there are various mechanisms that this is happening through, as I said, through funded projects, but also through some cascade grants. So the EOSC Association, which I mentioned earlier, is also leading a project called EOSC Gravity, and they are providing cascade grants to accelerate nodes to be in the position where they can apply to become a node. And that's where we come into the EOSC Gravity preparatory projects, because that's what we're going to talk about really for the next few minutes. And Sophie's already mentioned, and Joy, the PATH2EOSCUK UK project. We've received a small amount of funding to do this preparatory work to help us take steps forward in working out what a UK node should be, what it should look like. And these are our fellow projects. So you can see again, there's a mix of further national nodes and other thematic nodes. So we are all working together and collaborating and trying to learn lessons from not only each other, but from the first wave and second wave nodes. So I'd just like to finish up with a few words on this particular project. So it's called PATH2EOSCUK UK. We had to come up with an acronym, and that's what we came up with, because it very much is about the path to EOSC. But one thing that's obviously very important to mention is that while we have had, excuse me a second. I'm in a room that the light, because I'm not moving, the light's just gone out. So bear with me. The lighting has just changed. Apologies. Okay, so we never left EOSC, despite there was a period where the UK wasn't associated to Horizon Europe, where we didn't have a representative on the steering board. The UK really was still much involved in EOSC activities. And there's just a selection of some of the projects that we were and are involved in. But I guess what was missing, and including, as I say, we actually led, UKRI STFC led the EOSC pilot project right at the start. So what we're missing, I guess, is that national join up, which we're hoping to take steps towards with some of this project. In terms of what the project will actually do, as I say, we're funded from the 6th of May to the 30th of November. We only found out about the funding at the very end of April, so we started pretty quickly. And yeah, it's a short time frame. The two main objectives we have for this are infrastructure mapping. So looking what we've already got and how that will fit with the EOSC environment, with the Federation requirements, and looking for use cases, so specific examples of how we can bring the benefits of UK research and infrastructure to Europe and vice versa. And we also need to look at scoping that UK node. And to do all of these activities, we need that element of community engagement, both to inform our discussions, but also to raise awareness of EOSC. So those are the general objectives. In terms of the specific activities, there are some requirements from the project call. So the ones with asterisks are the outputs that we have to produce. One of them is a project charter, or node charter, as I prefer to call it, which is essentially an application form to become a node. But it is important to note that this is not an application form. It is just a draft. We have no requirement as part of this project to actually submit an application to be a node, either as part of the project or afterwards. But we hope, and obviously the EOSC Association and governance do hope, that we get to that point. And no decisions have been made about what the node is, who runs it, and what it provides. So that's what this project is about, is trying to scope that out and do what makes sense for the UK. In terms of the events, as I say, engagement is a key part. We've got a use case development coming up. This is actually a preliminary workshop to kick us off. Then we'll be looking at specific use case developments, looking at the idea of competencies and competence centres and how they fit in to a node, looking at making the case for UK RPOs, because we realise that it's not always easy to make a case for EOSC and what it does. So we would like to provide some materials to help you do that. And then we're required to attend EOSC showcase events, but we'd also like to finish up with a final showcase event, which, as well as being a dissemination event for this project, also takes us into the next steps, takes us into the next stages of discussion around what a EOSC node should be, could be, and then hopefully at some point to an actual node application. And Joy will come back to those events, I think, at the end with a bit more detail. And to finish us up with a timeline, you see, this is the rough timeline. So we had a quick start in May and part of June with just getting up and running with the project. We're doing our consultation through July and August, which we appreciate is not the best of timing in the summer, but it's the timing of the project. And another quirk of this project is that it's a 6-month project, but our main deliverables of the project charter and the use cases are actually due at the end of month 4, which is basically the very start of September. So you can see we are actually on quite a tight timescale, but it's also why we really are focusing on this is a draft. This is just our first steps, the first parts of the discussion. And that's really all I wanted to say about the background to EOSC and to the project. And I'm hoping our next speakers will give you bring it to life, basically, give you more insight into what it means from a disciplinary perspective. Joy, am I handing to you or straight over to Stephen?
Yeah, well,
stop sharing.
So thank you very much, Helen. I think that was a great, in a nutshell, view of EOSC and the project. Like I say, we'll come back to questions later, but for now, we do want to go straight over to you, Stephen, and you can help us to understand why EOSC matters to you.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a thematic view on what we're doing with open science in EOSC, and the theme is going to be astronomy and citizen science. And this being EU, a lot of this EU funded work, I have to give the obligatory acknowledgements, which are here. And there's a lot, there have been a lot of projects, and there are a lot of words here for the acknowledgement, but this is the requirement. But hey, they give us money and I like money, so that's fine. So why do I care about open science? Well, the sort of science questions I care about are questions like, what is the nature of dark matter? And how do galaxies like our Milky Way galaxy come into being? And one of the techniques that I and others use to investigate these questions is a technique called gravitational lensing. And this is where you have a background galaxy seen through the warped space-time of a foreground galaxy. So I've got an example here. You've got a background object, and the light comes through the gravitational field, the warped space-time of a massive object, and then is received by us. And in fact, it's appears to be in 2 positions. It's lensed into 2 images. And here is a real gravitational lens where your background galaxy is seen through the core of a foreground galaxy, and it's actually warped into 4 images of the background galaxy. And this is also magnifying the background object. So these can act as cosmic telescopes, natural telescopes, to study distant galaxies in the early universe. Now, in open science context, a lot of this has happened through technologies built through what's called the International Virtual Observatory Alliance, the IVOA. And the UK has played an important role in shaping that. And some of the work that I do in this sort of research uses humans to do searching and crowdsourcing the data mining. And for that, we've used the Zooniverse platform, which is a UK invention also. And these 2 technologies lead into applications into the European Open Science Cloud, which I'll talk about next. So I just want to emphasize that astronomy in particular has, I mean, it sounds slightly hubristic, but I think there's a good case to say that it's led the way in open science. So we've heard already about the European Open Science Cloud and the FAIR principles: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But some decades before EOSC, there was this International Virtual Observatory Alliance, and they designed a structure for the sharing and interoperation of data sets. And I don't want to go into any of the details here, except just to say that it does incorporate findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And so this has really been the core of the thinking in astronomy. And we're also in a gigantic data set era. And so I've got an image here of an article from back in 2011, where it was pointed out that the Square Kilometre Array telescope is going to be monstrous. They were saying at least 1.5 petabytes of data. That's small now. And exaflop computing. So we are really in the era of giant data sets and giant data mining. And the particular project that I've been involved with is the European Space Agency's Euclid Space Telescope. That's a tens of petabytes scale data project. And there I'm looking for clumps in galaxies. We're looking for clumps in galaxies. So these are the little blue bits in this image from the Euclid Space Telescope of a nearby galaxy. And these are clumps where stars like our sun are being born. And this is another clumpy galaxy. This one is gravitationally lensed. So you see it looks like a swirl in a coffee, right? It's because it's being seen through the warped space-time of a foreground galaxy in the center. And this lensing is magnifying the background galaxy. So with the Euclid Space Telescope, it's mapping about a third of the sky to nearly Hubble Space Telescope quality. So it's transformative science. And because the image quality is so good, it's a great way to find these gravitational lensing events, these rare chance alignments of a foreground and a background galaxy. We predicted there should be 200,000 in the Euclid Space Telescope data, which is, a factor of 100 more than we've discovered so far. It's just a transformation in what we'll be able to discover about dark matter. But I'll zoom in on some of the part of the image here. They are to be found among 1 billion other galaxies. So it's a really big needle in a haystack problem. And so to solve this needle in a haystack problem, often people need to turn to machine learning technologies, to AI. But to train the AI, you need human classifications. You need a training set. And for that, we turn to humans. And I'm going to try to make the case to you that humans can do something that no machine learning can currently do. So they offer a research functionality that is unavailable any other way. So I want you to imagine that, say, you're a train operating company and you want to put a camera trap up for a camera for commuters, and you want to spot people who are skipping the barriers or something like that. So, and there are off-the-shelf face recognition technologies that can do this for you, okay? So that's a classic machine learning problem. So let's go to an image. So now a human being looking at this image will immediately go, wait, there's a clown in the middle of the image. What's going on here? Right. Whereas a machine would just go face, 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 and it wouldn't care that there's a clown. It would just treat it as a face. So a human being can take a step back from the problem that you're asking and say, you're asking the wrong question. And there's a level of cognitive flexibility there that is not available to just machine learning. So you've got to start. This is one example where you've got to start with a human training set. You've got to start with human classifications, human input. The machines can't do better at the moment. And so for that, the leading platform is the Zooniverse platform, which was was based on a project called Galaxy Zoo for mining astronomical data sets, and then was built up to a platform that covers all areas of science. I made these slides a few years ago. I think they're slightly out of date now, but it's over 400 projects to date. That's clearly the case. Over 2.2 million human volunteers contributing to science. Okay, and over 450 research articles. So I've got an animation here just skipping through some of the articles on the Zooniverse website. And over 700 million classifications that humans have contributed to research projects over all sorts of disciplinary fields, and I suspect it's closer to 1 billion now, and across all of the science clusters, all of the science areas of the European Open Science Cloud. And now this idea of crowdsourcing, getting people involved in scientific discovery, it's very much aligned with the mission of my own institution, of the Open University. So our mission is to be open to people, places, methods, and ideas. This is everywhere on campus. And our vision is to reach more students with life-changing learning. And the learning that you get from being involved in a research project is very, very tangible. So even though it's not the learning that's driving the activities, there is a subsidiary benefit of learning. And so we care very much at the Open University about this sort of way of doing research. And I've got a slide here of the sort of workflows here. So you have data coming in from the big research infrastructures on the left, churning around a research workflow and being output to open data and open research for the European Open Science Cloud. And you can see I've made this slide for internal use because here's the Open University, because we care about this also. I just want to zoom in on this workflow in the middle. So you imagine starting with human classification, and then using those human classifications to train a truth set for machine learning, then use the machines to classify the easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit, and then you can refocus the humans on the harder things, and then refine the machine learning, and then you go round and round and round this virtuous circle with machines and humans learning from each other and benefiting from each other. And that's very much the sort of research workflow of citizen science. And it's what we did to discover gravitational lenses in the first quick data release from the Euclid Space Telescope. Here are some of them. And it's what we've done also with the first big data release from Euclid, DR1, which is unfortunately still proprietary, but we have a spectacular 20,000 gravitational lenses found at the moment entirely by machine learning. We're just going through and checking them now, but it's very, very pure set of gravitational lenses. I would love to zoom in and show you, this is a mosaic of all of them, but unfortunately it's still proprietary, so I can't unblur it and zoom in. But if you'd like to see some of them, go visit Spacewarp's Euclid at spacewarps.org. So we're also building tools and data sets and services for open science related to this. We're going from ground-based resolution data from, for example, the Vera Rubin Observatory, which is something where UKRI have invested heavily, and sharpening it up to Euclid Space Telescope resolution. So we're going, here's Rubin-like data using machine learning to Euclid-like, and there's a truth set. I mean, to me, that just looks like magic. It's amazing work. It's done by my postdoc, James Pearson. And here's a gravitational lens, sharpened up with machine learning, and again there's the truth set. It's beautiful, and this will be an open tool, part of the EOSC services and tools. We also have searches for clumpy galaxies. I've here got a path from ground-based data to better ground-based data, deeper data, to space data, sharper data with Euclid. And then along the top, this is showing the progression of the workflow from citizen science labels to machine learning, faster RCNN, to a more advanced machine learning, mask RCNN. And we're also creating open science data sets with this. So where next, as I'll just wrap up by saying where next for EOSC UK, and how do we build on UK strengths? Well, what the EOSC Association is quite exercised on at the moment is the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda and the multi-annual roadmap, the SRIA and the MAR. And these are used by the European Commission to shape the funding calls, the work programme. So it's really important that we are influential on this. So citizen science, for example, is mentioned, but it's scattered throughout this document. And it would be nice if it were not quite so dispersed. It's a UK strength. It's absolutely one of our strengths. There is an aspiration for citizen science as an EOSC node. There's another one of these cascading grants. I'm involved in it, but there's a lot of UK heritage there from the Zooniverse and more. Astronomy could be an EOSC node. Here, we're fantastically good at astronomy in the UK. And there's a lot of virtual observatory heritage there as well. There's a story about how this is unfolded that I don't really have time to go into, but yeah, there is a place there we can be very influential. And of course, there is this call, the PATH2EOSCUK UK. But there is a surprising lack of universities from the UK involved in this activity. So I've got here a list of all of the universities involved in the EOSC Association. And this is the only UK university. It's that's just us. We're not really getting the message across. So to wrap things up, conclusions. There is a very strong scientific motivation for using human classifications to train machine learning. There is a very strong UK track record in the virtual observatory and in citizen science, in crowdsourced data mining. This is not outreach, by the way. This is doing research with the help of humans. The EOSC open research and training is very well aligned with the Open University's mission and its vision. And there are opportunities, I would say needs, for the UK to have coordinated policy inputs to the European Open Science Cloud. And with that, I will just wrap up.
Oh, thanks very much, Stephen. There are a couple of questions in the chat, so I will. I think Helen, you had your hand up, and then Carol. We can maybe come to Carol. So
yeah, I think my question was just going to relate to Carol's points. There is that I think Stephen, you are embedded in all of these activities, but for those of us that aren't, it's seeing exactly what is EOSC, where does EOSC fit in all of the pictures of everything that you've described there. Which parts are, is there any relation to any of the nodes, or what is being part of EOSC enabled as in terms of those activities that you've described?
Okay, so some of these projects, a lot of the work that I've shown has been funded through EOSC projects. So the OSCARS project funded an open science project for the deconvolution work, for going from ground-based space data to space telescope data, and create open science tools. So it was looking for use cases for research applications, open science contexts. And so we applied for it was a very competitive call. We applied for funding for there, and they funded it. Also through the ESCAPE project. So this is one of the thematic cells of the European Open Science Cloud. It was previously a candidate node, but part of the ESCAPE remit, so it's astronomy, astroparticle physics, and particle physics, and part of that became the CERN node. And so there's been an aspiration: do we make a node out of from astronomy, from the remaining part? But as part of building this, the tools and services for ESCAPE, we had funding to create use cases and sort of worked examples. So that's how part of some of this other stuff was funded.
Well, that's great. I don't know, Carol, I don't know if you wanted to unmute or ask any other questions.
No, I was going.
Yes,
Thank you for following up my my point. So actually, EOSC is being used mainly as a funding agency, as Joy and Helen and others know. There was a comment that not many UK universities are involved. An enormous number of UK universities are involved because they're taking money from EOSC. My own small group has 5 EOSC projects funding it right now, and that's just my small 20-person group. So one can imagine what the scale is across the country. So it would be worthwhile, perhaps, Helen, Joy, and so on, us landscaping what actually is currently being funded as EOSC, and people will be at the EOSC project meeting in Brussels shortly. So I think that's different to the federation and to the node construct and the governance and the issues to do with service obligations and provisioning, which I think Helen highlighted. So I think it's worthwhile separating out projects that are delivering things.
We are actually planning to do that, Carol, so apologies. And at the end of the session, we would be Joy will be describing the work that we're doing on trying to map the current activity in EOSC. So we've got 2 different types of mapping going on, one around the infrastructures that the UK could possibly bring into EOSC, and also around the activities. But I'll hand over to Joy, I think, to keep going.
I would just like to point out that the list of universities not involved was the EOSC Association, and it is that EOSC Association that is making inputs on the SRIA and the MAR. And if we want to be influential on the future funding calls and use, as you put it, EOSC as a funding agency, if we want to be influential on that and make it fit for what we want scientifically, we have to be engaged in the EOSC Association. And at the moment, that's not happening. That's something where I think we could do better as a national community.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I took away from your talk, Stephen, was the fact that whatever we're doing, it needs to be transformational for researchers. So researchers really need to benefit from this. But equally, and I think this kind of comes back to points Carol has made a few times before, it needs to be something that our organizations care about. And that's why part of what we're trying to do is to come up with a briefing document at some part as part of the work we're doing. And that need to be able to kind of make the case as to why you might want to be a member of the EOSC Association. So these are arguments we're all going to work towards. As Helen mentioned, we are pulling together a list of all the projects because it's been quite difficult to know actually how many people are involved in various different projects. Until you come to meetings, sometimes you see people that you had no idea were working on EOSC related projects. So that's part of what the PATH2EOSCUK project is looking to do as well. So I think we're going to move on now to Sally's talk, and she's now going to give us her view on why EOSC matters. And then after that, we will have some more time for discussions. So feel free to keep adding questions and comments to the shared document in the chat. Over to you, Sally.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. So hopefully you're seeing some slides now.
Yep, we are.
Great. So lovely to see so many people interested in this. So I'm Sally Chambers, and I've got 2 hats on, and I would try and interweave the 2 hats. But what I've decided in terms of the thematic and why I think EOSC is important is looking at cultural heritage data as humanities research data. So the intersection between, for example, cultural heritage data from cultural heritage institutions and then arts and humanities research, so digital humanities, for example, and sort of try and weave that both at the UK level and the European level, and by that tell the story of why all of this is important. So I wanted to start with this. So I've got my 2 hats on. DARIA, which is, if you don't know, is a European digital research infrastructure for arts and humanities. And I'm working at the British Library too. And it's very interesting to see knowledge and the creation of knowledge, and that's why we are doing research, is at the basis of both of our missions. So DARIA is empowering research communities with digital methods to create, connect and share knowledge about culture and society, whereas the British Library is to make our intellectual heritage accessible to everyone for research, inspiration, enjoyment. So it's both of these, making knowledge matter is at the heart of both of our missions. So why is this relevant? And Stephen has said already a lot about this. So if EOSC is really about fostering the uptake of open science in Europe, how can we use EOSC to sort of build in open science into our everyday work via these infrastructures? And it's already been mentioned several times, the Oscars project, which is where I first met Stephen as well. And that is related to open science clusters, action for research in society. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So if I understand correctly, there are 5 different clusters. They're called science clusters, and that's how they've grouped the various different research infrastructures at the European level. So I will talk to more about the social sciences and humanities cluster on the right-hand side of the screen. And Stephen was talking more about the astronomy and particle physics cluster at the left-hand side of the screen. And we also have a cluster for environmental sciences, life sciences, and then photon and neutron sciences. And that's one of the great things about this Oscars project. It brings all of these different scientific communities and their research infrastructures together. So I'm diving into a little bit of detail about one of those clusters, which is the social sciences and humanities cluster. So I'm now looking at it in from the research infrastructure lens. So some of you may be aware of something called ESFRI. So I'm going to introduce a couple more acronyms. So ESFRI is the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures. So basically it is the umbrella organization where research infrastructures at the European level are integrated with. And here on this sort of beautiful visualization, these are the 11 or 12 research infrastructures that are currently under the banner of the social sciences and humanities. So here, and we can, I forgot to do that. I was going to do that, put on the ones where the UK is involved, but we've got, for example, the European Social Survey, which is led by the UK at City St George's. That's one of the examples. Here we've got Sester Eric, who are also the UK involved, Clarin as well, Daria in Arts and Humanities, where I represent, and the UK is actively involved, but not a member at the moment. But here you can see all of the different infrastructures that are contributing to the area of social sciences and humanities and are part of this cluster. And I'm saying this importantly because, as one of our colleagues from the environmental sciences said, it's about research infrastructures are about putting the science into EOSC. So if EOSC is an E-infrastructure, we have got to make sure that we make the interconnection with the domain specificities. So I'm lucky enough to be chairing the Social Sciences and Humanities cluster this year. And as part of that work, we've got 3 key areas of work. So very much similar to what Stephen was just saying, we're working on data, tools and workflows. And I will say a little bit about our cluster catalogue, which is the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Marketplace. And as part of this work, we're exploring the readiness at the European level to become a thematic node for EOSC. Then we've got training and education, which I won't go into in too much detail, but I think Helen and Sophie at the beginning said that this is really important from the UK perspective as well. And here we have an emerging competence centre which brings all the training activities together. And of course, advocacy and outreach. So for the social sciences and humanities, it's really important to make our voice heard across all of the different clusters. So as Helen mentioned, there's something called the EOSC Federation Handbook. And one of the things that we have to provide as part of this becoming a node is a catalogue of all our tools, services and data sets. So we already have something in the social sciences and humanities called the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Marketplace. And there's already quite a few contributions to this. So I noticed Karina is in the room. She's been making training materials available through one of her IDA projects and making them available in the SHOC in the DRI campus, and that automatically flows through to make sure those training materials are available in the open marketplace as well, and hence this is a pathway towards EOSC. So here, this is very similar to the slide that Helen mentioned, but I just wanted to mention one additional thing. So here we are building and we are working together with the EOSC Association and the emerging EOSC Federation towards an EOSC Federation Forum. So Helen mentioned also the use cases. It's really important that the researchers that are behind those use cases can start to talk together. And this will be launched at the EOSC Symposium, which will take place in October this year. But we're trying to develop with a number of the science clusters this idea about building an EOSC Federation user forum. So this is meant to be a shared space where the EOSC Federation research community really learns, asks and grows together. So this is meant to be a mechanism to try and get the researchers who are engaging with EOSC to have an opportunity to talk together via a user forum. And that will be launched at the end of this year. So in terms of what Helen was saying, we've got the user EOSC Federation Handbook. That is really a really important document. And what we're trying to do is to understand how, as the social sciences and humanities cluster, we can engage in this. And we're very lucky. So from the 1st of September, another project to add to the EOSC family of projects. This is the EOSC Mesh project. And here we are working with the social sciences and humanities in terms of helping to be connected to EOSC as well. And another node that may be of interest is the scholarly communications node, which is together with Open Air and Operas. And here you'll see that JISC is also one of the partners involved in the project as well. So it would be interesting to make the interconnection there with the EOSC Mesh. And the idea is, like Helen was saying, they have to produce their project charter. We need to produce something very similar for the social science and the humanities. And the idea is we actually enroll as a node in the EOSC Federation by month 24 of the project, which is September 2028. So now I've sort of sketched the top level, and what I wanted to bring down is how can we actually navigate this as research infrastructures, as researchers, this complex landscape. And this is where I want to remind us that bring in cultural heritage data as humanities research data. So Helen mentioned that EOSC is also seen as the data space for research and innovation. And there are other data spaces out there. So in terms of humanities and social sciences, we have the cultural heritage data space, or the data space for cultural heritage. And this is a key initiative at the European level that the UK is also contributing to. For example, the British Library is a member of the data space for cultural heritage, where cultural heritage data is being provided at the European level. Then, in a similar way to Stephen says the importance of AI for cultural heritage data, there is another initiative called the Cultural Heritage Cloud, where we're looking at state-of-the-art processing, and that is being implemented by something called the ECHOS project. And then if we have at the bottom the social sciences and humanities open marketplace as a pathway to providing this kind of data into the EOSC Federation, this is a sort of virtuous circle where we can move the data around. So thinking about navigating this complex research infrastructure landscape. So if we've got at the top of here, the screen, got one of the science clusters, the SHOP cluster looking after social sciences and humanities. How can we sort of build in the relevant nodes? And I think this is something that we will look at in the EOSC Mesh project, but I can imagine there are various different nodes that will be developed under the banner of social sciences and humanities. So for example, the social science surveys, European Social Survey, UK is leading this. Their node related to social science surveys. Within the EOSC Mesh, we're looking at a node for arts and humanities, so DRI, Clarin and IRIS, which is another research infrastructure that the UK is active on in terms of heritage science. And I'll come back to a different diagram about that from the UK perspective. And also the cultural heritage node. So there is developments in terms of the data space for cultural heritage and the collaborative cloud. So we can see a number of nodes under the banner of social sciences and humanities. But what does this all mean for researchers? So now we're looking about the delivery of what we're calling reproducible open science workflows. So this is being developed in both the context of the OSCUS project that we've already talked about, and then the ECHOS project, which is related to the collaborative cloud. So from a research perspective, on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got many different types of cultural heritage data. So we could have digitized historical newspapers, we could have handwritten archival documents, we could even have cuneiform tablets with the text written on there, to web archives, social media archives. So we've got a lot of information that we need to make available. Then, so very similar to what Stephen was saying, it's really important that we've got domain experts in the loop to datify this data or make it available so it can be analysed, for example, for digital humanities research. So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the cultural heritage organisations that can provide their data. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the research infrastructures such as DRI and Clarin, where we have the tools, and all of this can be fed into the ecosystem of EOSC. So it's the system of systems, or the web of fair data, are two key concepts. So let's go into that into a little bit more detail. So cultural heritage data as humanities research data. This was a paper that we wrote about the importance of cultural heritage data for humanities research a couple of years ago now. And this was the starting point of where we could start thinking about all of this. In terms of the two initiatives, so the common data space for cultural heritage and the collaborative cloud for cultural heritage, which, like the OSCUS project, has a lot of cascading grants and sister projects. So there's a lot of work happening in these different activities, and these two initiatives have decided to join forces. So this makes the ecosystem a little bit more easy to navigate. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and moving into the British Library and the cultural heritage data context of, in this case, this is funded by the IDA service from the AHRC. This is one of the IDA projects, and it's about introducing the shared repository service. So many thanks here goes to Jenny Basford, who is the repository services lead, and this is her project, and she's leading this on behalf of the British Library. But here we have a kind of mini federation of different types of repositories. So here you can see we have, for example, the British Library repository, we have the British Museum Research Repository, and we have the Tate repository, just examples of different kinds of cultural heritage institutions that we have within the shared repository service. And what makes this is really exciting is that we have this shared repository, and what we can do is search across all of these different types of repositories. Here is the whole list of 10 repositories we have currently, and this is something that we can provide access to the research data and publications from all of these different types of repositories. So the idea is that we could even expand the shared repository service to all of the institutions in the IROC. So that's the Independent Research Organisation Consortium, which is related to the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And this is a network of museums, galleries, libraries, and other UK heritage organisations that could all make their data available via the shared repository service in the future. So if we're thinking about cultural heritage data as humanities research data, this shared repository service could really be a pathway towards EOSC. So drilling down into a little bit more detail, this is the British Library repository as part of the shared repository service. And here open research is built into it from the start. So here we've got an open access repository, and the content includes all kinds of different research outputs from these different organisations, or from the British Library in this case, such as journal articles, conference papers, books, book chapters, reports, and most importantly here in terms of the Web of Fair data, the data sets that have been provided through the cultural heritage, through the different kinds of cultural heritage and other heritage organisations. And in the case of the British Library, we've got a whole wealth of collections, and we can think about how we can provide our collections as data or as data sheets for cultural heritage data sets through the research repository to the EOSC Federation. Here we can see, you won't be able to see it, because we've got over 400 different data sets already in the British Library Research Repository, which could be made available in the wider EOSC Federation. And just one more shout out as well. The British Library is the UK Data Site Consortium lead. So all of these different research outputs have a DOI that has been minted as part of the shared repository service. So just to wrap it up and bring it down into a little bit more detail, another important thing to point out, and this is a sort of future development, is within the shared repository service, as well as providing sort of different types of repositories such as the British Library or the National Library of Scotland, we would also like to provide micro repositories for smaller institutions where they don't necessarily need to have their own repository. So this really enables us, these micro repositories work with smaller institutions, so we can make sure that smaller institutions are also possible to join such a thing like the EOSC Federation. And then just wrapping this up as well, how can we see the shared repository service as part of this wider cultural heritage ecosystem? So at the top, we have the shared repository service, which is already 10 different cultural and other heritage organisations which provide their data and data sets via that. We have the Heritage Science Data Service and the RICHES infrastructures, which are part of the UK landscape. They feed into infrastructure such as the ERIS infrastructure for heritage science, which feeds in and collaborates with the Common Data Space for Cultural Heritage and the Cultural Heritage Cloud. And all of this could be pathways towards making this data available via the EOSC Federation. And just to wrap up, Eamon Bell from the University of Durham has already been experimenting with the different kinds of actionable workflows, which is the way we can do this within the EOSC context. And he's been experimenting with Galaxy, that originally comes from the biomedical sciences, I think, in the humanities context as part of another project called the Atrium Project, where he's been looking about how Galaxy can be used for social sciences and humanities. And that's something that we're plugging into our social sciences and humanities workflows as part of the Oscars project. So just 2 slides extra. This may be particularly of interest. Helen mentioned it very briefly about the co-funding. There will be a webinar this Thursday at 2 o'clock Central European time, so UK time 1 o'clock, about expanding and deepening the EOSC Federation, and this is how member states can get involved. So that may be another webinar that you're interested in signing up to. And if this has been not enough EOSC for you, there is the EOSC Symposium, where a lot of these use cases and projects will be presented, including the EOSC User Forum. That will take place in October in Florence, and registration is already open. So I'll leave it there and come back to this discussion. Thanks very much.
So thanks very much, Sally. I think your slides demonstrated just how complicated it can be, because we have, shared infrastructures that we're using in the UK community, and they're already integrating with European level infrastructures. And it's just kind of understanding how all of these things fit together. And it just shows, I think, both Sally and Stephen, your talks, just how many different activities are going on. And I know in the chat, there was a lot of discussion about how we need to get a better sense of exactly what has been funded in the UK, and we are trying to do a little bit of that. While I have you there, Sally, there was a question in the shared notes that I thought we could come to before we open it up, and it was just asking, how can local or institutional repositories be integrated into an EOSC node? And I think partly because you were talking about that in your work, maybe you have some advice.
Yes, no, definitely. And this is going to be sort of the difficulty of understanding. Well, let me put it from the researcher's perspective. I try to sort of say there is the complexity of the landscape and how we navigate it, but it's got to be clear from a research perspective. So I think there needs to be a node strategy, so we can sort of say, so for example, the shock node, and this could be a first place for people who are interested in the social sciences to look at the best way to interact with one of the nodes. So for example, if it was a UK organization, then maybe the first point of call would be the emerging UK node to be able to connect to the EOSC ecosystem. And then what we've really got to figure out is, for example, if we had within the UK, if we had sort of all of the social sciences and humanities coming together, and that feeds up to the European level, it's the best way.
I think we've lost Sally.
From a user perspective. Oops,
I think you
dropped
out just for a brief moment there yet.
Yes. So from the user perspective, where is it likely that the users that you would like to reach is the best way to connect to the EOSC Federation? So I'd say there's the national level and there's the thematic level, and it's figuring out which is the best way to connect to that. But other colleagues might have other comments as well.
Yeah, I'll let anybody else provide any answers to that before we go to the next question. If anybody has any other comments. Okay, it seems like we can go on to the next question. So I see there's a raised hand. Karina.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Sally. I wanted to get your thoughts around and maybe views on the previous question, which is how the roots for how do you put effort towards delivering data workflows in ways which are amenable to EOSC. And to me, the kind of key question is, as we are going towards this federation roadmap and recommendations, I mean, do you see here ERICS as being key kind of strategically very important to get to EOSC? Or do you see other paths that we should be thinking when we say, how do we take the repositories or the data or the workflow that we are producing, even the Galaxy, and make sure that they are ready to interface in this kind of aggregated or kind of all connecting ecosystem?
I think there's no single right answer to this. I think at this point, I think I definitely think the ERICs have a huge part to play. And I think for those of you maybe who don't know, these are European research infrastructures, mature ones that have their own legal entity, and they are, generally quite mature. And I think as Carol and a few others have been talking about the kinds of areas you're working in, there's already that kind of integration with some of these research infrastructures. And I think Sally was picking that up as well. And I think the key thing is, I guess we want researchers to work in whatever way works best for them. And it's working out where these services do fit best for them. Rather than trying to shoehorn something into the wrong kind of a node, I think is trying to make sure we can get things to be accessible in the right kind of a way to do it. So I see, Sally, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, maybe just briefly. I mean, I'm obviously a bit biased, so I definitely see that ERICs and S3 infrastructure. So just to make that clear, ERIC is the legal form of many of the S3 infrastructures, and S3 is the umbrella. So I think that research infrastructures, because they do provide a lot of infrastructural support and services. So, for example, we could like the shared repository service, for example, could be onboarded to the social sciences and humanities marketplace, and that could be a step towards EOSC and interconnecting. But I think it's really important that we deal with each different country and understand. I love this infrastructure mapping exercise, because it's in my dream, I would like to have pathways to EOSC for example, social science and humanities for each country, and how it interfaces with the European level. And it needs to make sense with what is already in that country. So we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. We should be building on what is already the infrastructures that have been provided there for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Carol, I don't know if I can ask you to say anything about that, because I know you're involved in so many of these kind of thematic ones, and through Elixir. Do you have a kind of a view on this?
Yeah, so I was about to type into the chat actually that many of the nodes are actually founded in the S3s. That's where their DNA comes from. And so the life science node, for example, is actually a collection of EMBL, Elixir, Instruct, and Eurobioimaging, with the S3s who have come together. What's interesting, I think, to explore is the interrelationship of the thematic nodes with the national nodes, and notably who has governance over the services. So in the thematic nodes, we've been driving to have multi-partnerships in providing services across a nation state. So I'm running services which are partnered with multiple countries. But then if they become part of a national node, who's responsible for them? And who's responsible for their sustainability? Who's responsible for their participation or access? So it's all these rules of participation, obligations, and governance that and the interactions of the different nodes that's not clear to me at the moment from a service point of view, from somebody providing a service. So that's what I think we have to challenge ourselves.
Just respond to that, Carol. As part of the research we're doing as part of this project, we're initially starting looking at the national nodes, basically reviewing the current nodes and looking at their node charters and looking into exactly what you say there, who is running them, who is providing the services, what's the governance behind that, to look at the different models. Are different models emerging? Is there something that we could adapt or we could bring into the UK, or do we have to look at something different? Just for time purposes at the moment, I'm sticking with the national nodes, but it sounds like it might be worth looking at thematic as well. I don't know if anybody else is doing that work on thematic nodes, sort of looking at the different structures that are emerging out of their development.
Yeah, I think it sounds like, to me, it would be useful because there is so much overlap. And I think Carol's point, again, while we've been having in the chat that EOSC is a funding source, it is through these cascading grants, but I think it's important to know that, once you have an operational node, the money has to come from whoever's running. Yes.
Countries and national subscriptions.
So I think, there's a lot to be said for getting some seed funding through these kind of cascading grants to start looking at use cases. And I think, we've seen through the chat, there's no shortage of things we could be looking into doing and lots of interesting shared services. But yet that kind of longer term sustainability is still going to be a challenge, and we haven't quite figured out how that's going to work yet. I did want to come to the chat again. We had a question from one of our colleagues from Enria in France. And it was a good question. She was just asking, from her perspective, the UK research community is already well represented in the EOSC Federation by the thematic nodes. So she's asking, what do we think might be the added value of having a national node? So I don't know if Helen, if your hand's up because you want to.
Yeah,
maybe...
I know we have heard that viewpoint before in previous consultations, and Hugh's already addressed in the comments saying, couldn't you say the same of other national nodes? And it's part of what I've been trying to pull out from reading through the project charters, but I think we need to do a bit more work actually just talking directly to people who represent the nodes to understand the motivations. What is it they're trying to achieve through the creation of a national node? And sometimes it is to further their own national infrastructure. Similar to us, they have a good, strong infrastructure, but maybe they want to join it up a bit more. So, in Finland, enabling federated data across, federating all of their existing data repositories. The Czech Republic, for example, have basically used EOSC to develop a lot of their research infrastructure. So there isn't a separate research, it's the research infrastructure they have has been developed through EOSC. To put quite crudely, I'm sure they may correct me on that, but they so I think it comes back to something that Stephen said there as well. It's about working out, what is it that we in the UK are trying to do? What do we want to do? And how do we make the most of the opportunities in EOSC to do that through funding, but also through influence and through, because we have pioneered a lot of these technologies and some of these services. So, but we need to have a clear idea of where we want to go, and that's what we'd like to do to start that conversation with this project. But given the constraints of the project, I think it is just to start the conversation. I don't know how far we'll get with that. So Sally, over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, just very briefly, sort of what we're trying to do at the DRI EU level is, so we have in each country, we have a national coordinator, and what we're trying to do is for the DRI and national coordinator in each country to identify who is the coordinator or who is coordinating EOSC in their country, so that we can start having that conversation. So as Helen was just saying, in some countries they don't have research infrastructure, sometimes they don't have EOSC. And it's about joining up the dots, I think, in each of the different countries. And I can imagine there'd be different flavors or needs of nodes in different countries, but it's about making that interconnection with what is happening and who, as Carol was saying earlier, who is running that as well. So I think it is this infrastructure or this node mapping to see what is happening in the different countries, and I'm sure we can learn from a lot of the different countries as well.
Great, thanks. I think we've got Stephen as well. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the chat too.
Very, very briefly, I just wanted to respond to the idea that the UK research community can be covered by thematic nodes. It's a lovely idea. Unfortunately, the thematic nodes don't have the breadth of the UK research community. The thematic nodes as they exist at the moment and have been accepted at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we don't have an answer to this question at the moment. That's part of what the PATH2EOSCUK UK project is trying to decide. Is there an interest in a UK node? Is it better covered by some of the things we're already involved in? So it's certainly something we don't have an answer to. Where we're kind of getting close to the end of our slot here, and I see there's an awful lot of discussion in the chat about whether you could say the same about, the Netherlands, Germany, and a lot of other European countries who similarly have a very good representation, and whether they need national nodes. So all I can say is it's a question we will be coming back to the community to help us answer, because this is only something that we can decide as a collection of all of us. It needs to be something that we all agree is worth doing. I do have a couple of wrap-up points just to come back to before we send you back on your way. Let me just see if I can share my screen again. So let me go to the slide deck. That will work. I did want to just, we'll come back to the Slido in 1 minute. I did want to say this is just the start for us. So we do have a few other events over the 6 months that we're running. As Helen mentioned, we have just started last month, or basically this month, I think really was the first time we had our project plan approved. So it's going to be quite a tight time frame for us to work. We are planning an interactive session on the 21st of July. This is where we really want to look into that notion of a use case. I think through some of the speakers today, we've already heard there are lots of potential things we can think about as what kinds of services and things we would like to see in a UK node. This is our chance to start to explore that a little bit more in detail. The actual agenda for these sessions still being worked up. And if you are interested, I would just say save the date for now. It'll be from 2 to 4 BST on the 21st of July, and we'll have some details coming out on that a little bit later. I did want to also let people know that there are a couple of ways you can keep engaged with the UK activity around EOSC. There's been an EOSC at JISC mail list for quite a while now. I think at least a good number of years that this has been in existence. If you're not already aware of it, you can find the link in the shared notes to how to go and sign up to it. We'll be making use of that increasingly to try and share information with those people. So it's your chance to self-select if you want to be part of this discussions going forward in that format. Also in the chat, we did talk a little bit about the fact that we have been trying to map some of the current project-related activities just to get a sense of who's been getting money to do something related to EOSC. We've pulled together a data set already. It's there for you to consult and to add to if you feel that there's something missing. So that is something that we'll again promote through the mail list, but you also have access to it here. I did want to ask if people could go back to the WooClap poll if you can access the link. We just wanted to get a sense from you. I'm going to stop sharing here again and see if I can open up the poll. So we wanted to get a sense from you. I mean, it's a confusing topic. I think EOSC has always been a difficult topic to get your head around, but we wanted to get a sense from you. Since you've had this discussion from what EOSC is and some of the activities people are undertaking around it, do people feel you have at least a little bit better understanding of what it is now? Sometimes the more you learn about EOSC, the more confusing it can become. Unfortunately, it's one of those kind of beasts. So feel free, there's no, don't feel you have to say yes. I can see there's quite a few people unsure. A few people have more. We'll leave that poll open, but please, you can come back to it and add, but I did want to move on to the last one. The last question is just to say again, if you would like to be involved in further activities. So as we said, it's a very short time frame that we have, but it looks like most people who are here in the room today are here because they want to be involved. So that's great. If you are keen to be involved, I would say then please just put your name in the shared document, and we will make sure that we keep you posted on all of these activities and chances to get involved with us. So we are on 3:30 in the dot now. So thank you very much to all of the speakers for joining us today. And thank you to everybody who's taken time out to come and start the discussions with us about the European Open Science Cloud and a possible UK node. We do hope that this is just the start of some discussions. So thanks again to everybody for taking part, and we hope to see you in the next few weeks at a similar event. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Great. Well, thanks very much to you guys for all of your presentations. They were great to have all the different perspectives. It is always interesting just to see how much is going on